There we go. Welcome to Leadership Lab. This is where you get stories and strategies and all the things you need to do, the insights. It's a half therapy, half motivation, and half success story. Sound good? On what it takes to be successful in life and in business. So today we have an incredible crew. We got the amazing co-pilot, Rick Davis, who is the king of telling your story. Yes?
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, and I love the fact that we came in hard and it's 3 halves. So like you get 150% in here.
Yeah, that's it. Now, here's the thing. This is our first episode ever, so we're all going to look back at this in 10 years and go, that was the beginning. We started at the top of the mountain. Most people work their way up. We're going to go right to the top. So this is going to be the best of the best. And we're going to see what we have to do.
We are starting on a high, and it'll be right into the ditch.
There we go. We have the man, the myth, the legend, Don Hobbs with us. So, Don, thank you for being here.
Yeah,
especially impromptu.
My pleasure.
Yes, we're standing next to each other yesterday, and I'm like, yeah, what are you doing tomorrow at 9 o'clock? And here we go. So
the fact that I had nothing going is kind of sad.
Well,
no,
here's the thing. He did have 4 things going.
I
was like, he's like, oh, I'm free. I'm like, I don't think so. Like that doesn't. And he's like, no, I'm good. Right? Texting his assistant, like, move stuff. So thanks for making this happen. So here's what I want to dive into. Let's just get right into it. This is about, we've talked a lot about, especially when it comes to leadership, the mindset and everything else, correct? Right, what it takes to be successful. So the first thing is, Don, you've had, we can literally spend the whole show going through your bio. And yet it's ironic that you actually were the president of Success Magazine, so you might be the right guy to talk to. And all the things you've done, you own and launched, right, the biggest real estate coaching company in the world, all these other accolades. Here's what I want to get right into. You mentioned on another show that we did about the power of asking. And I would love to know, what's the power in asking? Because I think a lot of times people are kind of waiting for the opportunity to show up, right? Which is great, and they're positioning. What's the power in being a great asker?
Wow. Okay, great question. Let's start off heavy. Asking is the beginning of everything. Asking is the beginning of receiving, first of all. Let's start there. So we generally aren't going to get, maybe we get lucky, maybe something drops in our lap. I don't believe in that. I believe that we've either asked consciously or unconsciously. By the way, positive or negative, meaning stuff's in your world and you're like, I don't like this stuff. You asked for it. You did, whether you consciously asked for it or not, right? So asking is the beginning of beginning, or the beginning of receiving. And I think that, when we get better at asking, and asking with confidence, and asking from a place of sincerity, and asking from a place of humility or humbleness, if that's maybe a better way of saying that, coming from a place of I don't have to know it all, it's okay to not, and to be able to ask for help.
Yeah.
Nobody succeeds alone. You and I, hung out with a guy that made that kind of a main point. Nobody succeeds alone, and I think the part that people forget is there's no such thing as a self-made anybody. They did it with other people. Now, some people do it on other people and over other people, but you don't do it alone, regardless. And so we need to get better at asking for what we want, hanging out in rooms with people that have more, know more. Again, the old thing about, I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I really don't. There's no advantage to me, unless my ego needs it so that everybody goes, wow, you're amazing. Then that's a different thing, because if you're really into that place, then yes, get around small players and go, look at here. But the fact is, for most of us, if we want to grow, I remember Tony telling me one time, he said, I got this opportunity to go to this mastermind with these mostly billionaires. And he said, I wasn't in that league. I couldn't afford the whatever. It was a private plane. I had to pay for this. I didn't know where I was going to get it, but I knew that if I got on that plane and got to that place, I'd be hanging out with those people. And how do you not win from that? Because you're around these people and you ask questions.
What's so funny is he says Tony.
I'm sorry.
And you and I know he's talking about Tony freaking Robbins.
Right.
And he's like, Tony.
Sorry,
and
I missed that.
No, I think it's amazing.
Sorry, I missed that.
Isn't that great? And here's 2 things that stood out to me. One is, first off, I love that. But 2, the first thing that stood out to me was we get what we ask for consciously or unconsciously. And I just want everyone to really get, because you just dropped a huge nugget there. How many people are not getting their conscious goal, but they're nailing what they're asking for unconsciously. Yeah. Right, like they're crushing their unconscious requests that are negative and demeaning, all this other stuff, right? So I just think that's such a huge nugget you just dropped out there. It's like, you better get aware of what people are like, I don't believe in affirmations. 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 Right? It's kind of the same thing, right?
Oh, the
right?
irony.
Like, well, they kind of believe in you. So like, what are you?
I've never been good at that. I've never been good at that.
Yeah.
That's not my thing. I just don't know how to do that. I'm
Yeah.
never like.
Yeah.
and
It's like, man, that's weird. That's never changed. That's crazy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
and in that, with no question,
Yeah.
they're still asking for it.
100%.
Right.
Yes.
So now
Yeah.
I'm curious from the coaching standpoint. So like for the 5 years prior to COVID, I was Ebby Halliday's Google instructor. And so every other month I'd have 100 or so in the room, giant airplane hangar over by the Galleria. And I'm not techie. And so my biggest thing was I had to fight to just not write that, because, you know, if you got 2 hours, you got 100 people, it's like, okay, what, you know, what are we got diminishing returns right out of the gate, you know? So it's.
God bless you.
Oh, and
I'm glad you're still here.
Well, what's funny is you talk about like going to the front line to develop a thick skin, because I was always joke. I'd be like, they were so nice in person.
Yeah,
and then you'd get those anonymous reviews.
surveys.
Oh, and it's just knives in both hands, you know, just slow down, or just like written in like giant caps. But how do you guys get past the part where, or how many times does it take for somebody to say in front of you, like, oh, I don't do that, I'm not good at that, I'm not good at that, da 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 da. Okay, you're not good at that.
Well, here's what's interesting. Something you talked about earlier was, you know, people say, I'm just not consistent. And I go, how many days have you not fed your kids? And they're like, oh, I fed them all the days. So I was like, interesting, right? So like sometimes you got to help them find evidence, at least, right? You got to help them find evidence of success. Like you fed them every day for the last 18 years, so you can be consistent. Like let's just figure out how to do it here. So I think that's a piece of it.
Habits.
Yeah.
I mean, habits. I don't do well. I have a hard time changing my habits. No, you live in a habit.
Yes.
You are a habit.
Yes.
Like everything you do is a habit. If you watch the way you dry your body getting out of the shower, it's a freaking habit, right? We're good at habits. We're just not good at consciously choosing the habits we're going to dig in on and go all in on and commit to, because we don't want to have failure. So if I don't commit to it, then it's not, it's not a bad thing, right? So
How would you encourage someone to ask better questions and to seek bigger opportunities? Because you've asked big questions. You've been in the biggest rooms. You've hung out with the biggest people. You've been handed the biggest opportunities. I mean, people like Jim Rohn and Tony and Gary Keller also, hey, here's the baby, take care of it. I mean, that's amazing to be gifted those things. And I assume there's had to be some sort of questions in putting yourself in those opportunities.
I think for one thing, let's get to the right people. So having, years ago, Russell Brunson, people know him for marketing, or they don't know him at all because he's like the guru. He'd be like the Tony Robbins of marketing, right? He's a big deal. And Russell taught me the Dream 100 concept. Well, then I find out that Chet Holmes, who actually built Tony Robbins' coaching company with him and did the marketing behind it, was the one who taught him, right? So he was a client. So the Dream 100 is this idea of having 100 people that are the people you would love to get to. You don't know how you're going to do it. You don't know how to find them. You don't know, but you knew if you got to those 100 people, they would change your world. It could be top best clients, could be top best influencers. It could be anything, right? What your Dream 100. And what I would say is, first of all, be aware of who's out there that you really lock into and admire, maybe that relate to. I just was talking about John Maxwell, and again, John, if you're watching this, don't hate me. I've just never been a John Maxwell fan. I read his books and I go, wow, that was good. And then I'm just not a John Maxwell fan. It's like I just can't somehow get my hands wrapped around loving John Maxwell. Jim Rohn was my guy.
Yeah.
Jim Rohn was my guy. Andy Andrews, my guy. Like there's people that are just those people, but John's not that guy. So if I could get myself around, like get myself in the room, I remember, being president of Jim Rohn's company, but before I wasn't president of his company, I was a lackey, I was a salesperson. Tony and I were battling it out for sales. And literally, I was the first one to get there. Jim wouldn't show up first. He was going to be there when he got there for the program, the seminar, the training, whatever. But I would be the first one there because I wanted to be around the wise people that were the big players. Yeah. And I wanted to be the last one out because I was going to hang out with the last conversation and be there because I knew. So first thing to answer your question is figure out who you need to be in the room with or who you need to be asking. So find the right ask. And the second thing is, what's really amazing about asking is most of those people will say yes because nobody ever asks them. Nobody ever asks them. Nobody ever comes to them and says, could I buy you lunch? Could I buy you breakfast? Could I buy you dinner? Is there any chance I could get on your schedule for 15 minutes? I've got a couple questions that you could really help me with.
Yep.
And most of them are like, well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I've done it. People look up and they go, wow, could I get on? I was like, yeah, I'd love to help you.
Yep.
Love to help you.
Yeah.
Right? It's what supercharged me for 40 plus years, right?
Yes.
So
It's so
I
good.
think ask is, and then you have to ask intelligently. When you come to the party,
Right.
when you come to that thing, come with the questions,
Yes.
right? Come with what you really want to know. Don't ramble. Don't get to, I'm talking about. And by the way, I've seen people come to meetings with me, and they talk about themselves the whole time. And by the time we're in at the end of our time, they're like, well, I did want to ask you about, and I'm like, yeah, I got like 3 minutes to do this. So
it was. I had a mentor of mine years ago who taught me that. Right. I remember one time we sat down. And she goes, "All right, what question?" Had 10 minutes before an event, and she goes, "What questions do you have for me?" Thank God I'd been listening up to this point, and I had questions ready to go. But one of the things she taught me was like, be ready. Like you said, be ready in that
if you're
moment.
if you're in the room, you need to
Yes.
have the questions already figured
and
out.
she told a story about one time she was in first class and sat down, and it was, ironically, John Maxwell sat down next to her, and she goes, "All right, John, I have questions," but like she was ready to go, right?
Right.
Which is so part of it is like being the prepared and being intentional about it in the moment.
Yep.
And then if you want to get a great mentor, one of the things I've learned is ask a couple questions, and then a month later go back and go, "Hey, here's the advice. These are the 3 steps. Here's the advice." And one of my mentors taught me this. Here's what you told me to do. Here's what I did. Here's what happened, and I had another question if that's okay, right? Like that's how when you go back to a mentor and you go, "You told me this, I did it." The mentor's like, "Holy cow, you're one of the one, the one, right? Yeah, exactly, that actually did the thing." And then they'll give you another piece of advice. So, but like you said, respect their time.
Yep.
I mean, I remember doing the same thing. Someone would be flying into town and be like, "Hey, can I drive you to the event?"
Perfect.
Right, I'll shut
Perfect.
up. Not 80% of the time, but I have 2 questions. Is that okay? Right.
Yep.
And I drive them around. Right. Just get in the room, get in that space. It's huge.
And if you get to a person that is receptive and open, and I think you'll find they're more open than you believe, that the internal clock is, who am I and why would they care about me, right?
Yeah.
But they do, because they care about people. That's how they've gotten generally where they got. And then I would say at some point you could even go further and say, I'm really loving the time. I love what you've given me. My life is changing. Would you mentor me?
Yeah.
And you might be shocked that they go, yeah, and they take on you as a mentee. Are you freaking kidding me? Life changer.
But you're going to earn the right to get that, correct?
Totally.
And I think that's what people don't get is like you have some events coming up that everybody should go to, masterminds, things like that.
Right.
So, but if somebody just randomly comes and said, "Hey, can I buy you lunch?" You're probably like, maybe not. Like I got stuff to do. But if they said, "Hey, can I buy an hour of your time?" Right, you're probably like, perfect. And then maybe the next question they have, it's like, "Hey, just text me," whatever. But like sometimes in the beginning, you have to pay to get in the room. You got to pay to get into the mastermind. You got to pay for the hour time. Like you need to show that person the respect of I'm going to get there. I'm going to buy the ticket. I'm going to pay to get in the mastermind, whatever it is. And then you earn the right to have the additional conversations, correct?
Absolutely. I went to Rowan's first seminar. I'm 18 years old. My mom buys me a ticket, says, your conversation reminds me of him. I'm like, how funny is that? He's like 40 years older than I am. Anyway, or 30 years older. So I go to his program. At the break, I walk up to him and I say, "I love what you're doing. I want to do what you do. I want to be like you."
Wow.
I'm now looking back and going, what was I thinking? Why would I say that to this guy? He doesn't know me from Adam. It's like...
And that was going to be my question. I was curious because obviously, both of y'all now are experienced and polished and all of those things, but it's like that whole idea of, was all of that intuitive as far as like, oh, I'm going to go to this thing. And then did it hit you like lightning where like, I'm just going to ask this question? Because in today's world, so many people are wrapped up with their own inner monologue that tells them that they can't. Because like a lot of times what I'm doing with people and like getting them out in front or getting them to be the face of their own face, it's your face, so it should
their
be
own
your
brand,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
But a lot of people are looking for, it's like they want permission from like some nebulous voice or whatever is haunting them in the back of their minds. But like you guys, did you just like sort of have that sort of like moment of clarity where it was like, I'm hearing this thing and I'm boom, 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 boom. Because
that's funny.
Because learned behavior in today's world doesn't really lend itself to doing something where like, I'm going to ask, going back to asking, and then the next like meta level of that is most people aren't going to ask if there's nothing in it for them.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. By the way, I hadn't thought about all these things. It's like old stuff, right? But I just thought of it as you were asking those questions, that when I went to Jim's 3-day program, the question I asked them that day was, "How do I work for you?" So I like. I was only with them twice.
Thinking about like what would that have been like in that moment.
I was 18 years old.
Wow.
Like, why would I even think, right? And I said,
Yes.
"How do I work for you?"
Yeah.
And he goes, "See that guy back there? Go talk to him." Right?
Yeah, like
I mean,
okay,
that-
so that's like
that's it.
I had
Zen mind
measles.
beginner's
While I worked for him, I had measles. He's like my kid. My staff is like kids. Tony Robbins
Yeah,
was 17.
yeah,
He was a year
yeah.
younger, right? And he's like, my kids are like, they have measles. Like, it was a crack up. But I asked, and I don't know if it was intuitive. I guess it was intuitive because
total Zen mind, beginner's mind kind of a thing.
something.
Well, I think there's two things there. One is listen to there is a still small voice inside of you that gives nudges. Right, and I think sometimes we get so used to pushing aside, we stop hearing it. But there is those little, and like so. First off, who was it? Bill Hart called it a shoulder tap. Right, he's like, when you get a shoulder tap, listen. So part of that was probably a shoulder tap. But the other thing is, I love your identity of like, and I just do it. Right, like I know what I did it, and I'm going to be okay with it way. But I am an asker. I am someone who asks. I am someone who's willing to be rejected. I'm okay with that. Right, like it goes also back to your core identity. And I think we've all had people that spoke into us, and we were naive enough, I guess, whatever you want to call it, but to listen. Mom said, go to the thing, and you went to the thing.
I did.
Right?
I did. Yeah,
And now I'm
absolutely.
curious, what do you guys think of? Because a lot of times,
All right, he's got
So
to
I was
roll.
gonna say like the where it's just putting in the reps.
Yeah.
Where like the math of like if I ask 100 questions, I'm gonna get 97 no's.
Try
but
to get
3 of them-
100 people to say no. Somebody's going to say yes. Yep. All right. Welcome to the first, last, best episode ever. Don, you are a legend. Thank you. We're going to put him in a bunker
Hey,
someday,
give me-
interview him for 20 hours.
Up
Seriously,
high.
thank you. So love
Yes.
this man. Love you both very much. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks, guys.
Go take action. Let us know the action you take. That's the greatest gift you can give us.
Ask for help.
Ask for help.
I love it. Thank you guys.